What's up, guys? This is Nick from Arch City Poker, and in today's video, I'm going to be starting another new series titled Poker Hand Reviews, where basically once a week I'm going to try and upload a video where I review a hand from my own personal hand history, whether that's live or online. I'm going to try to pick some of the more interesting hands and give you guys a little sneak peek into how I play some of my hands and what my thinking, or I guess my thought process is during each hand. So I'm going to try to keep this video as short as I can, like the other vlogs and videos I have, just for the sake of everybody's time. So I may go a little fast. If you guys have any questions or comments after you're done watching, of course, just let me know in the comment section. I will definitely clarify on anything that you guys have to ask. So let's get into the action. I raise to 5x in middle position with ace-jack of clubs. A loose, bluffy opponent decides to flat me on the button. I think his range is very wide at this point. He's more loose in the sense that I think he's more loose when he is betting or taking more of an aggressive action. He definitely calls a little too wide, but I think it's not as wide as when he bets. I think he's more likely to be induced, which you guys will see in this hand could very possibly have been the case. So he calls, we go heads up, see a flop of ace-3 deuce. We're quite deep in the spot. This board's very dry. I don't think this hand fits into my strategy as far as getting 3 streets of large value. In these live low-stakes games, I tend to simplify my strategy and polarize my range from out of position and bet a little bit larger. I think that this hand is pretty borderline for that strategy as far as how deep we are and what the board runout's going to be. I don't think my opponent is going to comfortably be able to call with ace-10 and ace-9 in this spot. So I don't think I get worse to call for 3 streets. Therefore, I think this hand works better as possibly a hand that gets 2 streets, whether that is flop, turn, check, river, or whether that's maybe turn and river. I tend to like checking the flop here, as I think I lose credit on my ace-x hands that are possibly in my range. I think most opponents just expect you to bet your ace-x hands here. So I decide to go for check, and my loose, bluffy opponent decides to check behind. So turn's a great card, obviously. Ace of diamonds. I'm going to bet pot here, and my loose opponent will call. At this point, I range him as basically having pocket pairs, maybe some diamond draws, as he's quite loose, and I think that most good opponents would be much more pair heavy in this spot, like have showdown value. I don't think that they will be just calling with diamonds here, although I could see him possibly doing that as part of a float play, but I don't give my opponent enough credit as far as his skill level for being able to pull this off. So he just calls, and the river comes a 6 of spades, and this is a very interesting spot. I think my plan originally in the standard plan would be, if I'm going to go for 2 streets of value, obviously the flop check through, I can very comfortably go bet on the turn of river. But with this particular opponent, and you guys see that I have him tagged as being a little bit more bluffy, this actually goes for him specifically a little more so on the river. I've said in a lot of my videos before that many, and by many I mean almost all, live low-stakes opponents do not bluff the river at high enough frequency. I think that my opponent here, particularly this opponent, is actually one of the rare ones where he actually overbets, I guess, like, and not overbets, but bets at way too high of a frequency with his air and with his bluffs. And I think that my hand here looks very weak. I don't think it ever looks like ace-x in the spot. I think my opponent may overvalue a hand like 6x and bet obviously better hands like 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s. And then I think he might bet maybe some of the diamond draws that he happens to have. So I thought in the moment that would be a little more profitable. I'm going to move to card runners after I show you guys the end of this hand and show you guys how it ended up working out in my opinion. And I think I made or took the correct line here. So I go ahead and check. My loose opponent does go ahead and he pots it for $70, or about pot. And I decided to call, and very interesting hand that he ended up showing, which was, I saw the king of diamonds first, so I thought it was diamond draw, but he actually just had king-jack offsuit. Very strange line from him. I'm not sure if he planned on floating the turn and then betting, obviously, as part of the float, bluffing the river. So very wide and loose call from him on the turn. And I think that my line ended up netting possibly the most EV. So I'll show you guys what card runners spit out, and I think you'll see it was probably correct. So we'll just move quickly to the river here for the sake of time in the video. Let's say I did bet pot. I think my opponent in this spot would in fact call with at least his one pair hands. And we'll actually say middle pair. So we'll say at least 6x plus. I think that's reasonable. I'm not sure if he would call that wide. But we'll say he folds pretty much everything else. And I know that he would raise his full house, but that's going to be in here as part of this defending range, so I'm not too worried about it. The whole point is showing you guys generally what about the EV is. I think my EV is about $91 in this spot. So obviously it's a very profitable bet. It's part of a very standard line, I think. However, I'm going to fold out all his misdraws, possibly pocket 5s and 4s. I think that a lot of these combos will bet as well as a lot of these combos that end up calling me with this particular opponent. So if that's the case, then I do believe that check calling will end up being the best line here on the river. And I haven't punched this in yet, but I believe this will end up being correct. So I check, and just stick with me here, guys. We'll say that he bets, which he did. Question is, what would he bet with? We'll say that he bets at least, we'll say at least 6x for the sake of the fact that I thought he might call with 6x. But we're going to add in all his flush draws. And I'm not even going to add in the air that he ended up actually having, because I just don't think most opponents end up with that type of hand. But obviously my EV will be higher than what it actually spits out. And we'll say he just checks behind with everything else. I end up calling, and we'll run it. And as you guys can see, this ended up being correct, at least with how I ranged him and how I thought that he would end up playing his hand. I ended up netting about almost $113 in EV compared to about the 91 that I had if I just bet out, specifically because all these combos that he was pretty much calling with, they're still going to be in there as part of his betting range, I guess, on the river. But I also add his flush draws, and not to mention, I don't have his air that he possibly could have had in here that I didn't have him basically calling with on the turn. So I think my EV is actually higher than what it spit out here, but I just think in general most opponents won't show up with King X that's not diamonds in the spot. So very interesting hand. I think that it was a pretty cool spot. I may have gotten a little cute with my line as far as a live low stakes line against a pretty bad and loose player, but I think that, you know, in these games, guys, you have to think about how you want to maximally exploit your opponents, and that's what it's all about. And I believe that this line, in fact, did that. So if you guys have any questions or comments about the hand, go ahead and let me know in the comments section. I can definitely clarify or answer anything that you guys basically will have to say. So this is Nick from Arch City Poker. Till next time, guys.